tough deals, steep bargains, and revolution in the skies. Frank Lorenzo up late with me tonight here on the Final Five. Sir, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
There is, I think there are few industries that people have such fondness and nostalgia for than the airline industry. And the first airline that I ever flew as a kid was Continental Airlines. It was the first place I ever discovered what a bagel was. But obviously, the industry has changed. But you were there for really some of the golden days of it all.
Well, some of the days when it really changed. The golden days were very short because for us in Texas, we had a lot of competition from an intrastate carrier, Southwest, just starting up. And then we went through airline deregulation, which completely changed everything. It wasn't so golden after that.
One of the things you talk about is how you take what are struggling airlines and try to make them profitable. When you look at your career, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in doing that?
Well, we were trying to build our airline into a playable hand in the deregulated environment. And you couldn't be a little tiny airline and survive against all the big guys with marketing muscle, with bigger airplanes, better airplanes, much more efficiency. You couldn't survive. So you had to make some changes. You had to have a strategy for doing it. And we put together a strategy to do that. You know, Congress, when they deregulated the airlines, they deregulated the costs. They deregulated revenues, but they didn't deregulate costs. So we still had to deal with the cost structures that were from the old days. So that's why I had a lot of issues with the unions.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because when it comes to labor relations, this is something that has been quite prevalent in the airline industry for years, maybe not so much at least in recent memory, but we have seen some back and forth. What did you learn from that, and how would you approach it differently today?
Well, you can't change the numbers. The numbers are very clear, and we needed major change in our cost structures. Could we have negotiated differently or come up with different packages? Sure. And I think some of the negotiations we could have improved, but that doesn't change the overall story. The fact is that the pilots union particularly seized on make Frank Lorenzo the issue. Don't talk about economics. We actually found a document that said that. It's really, and I outlined that in the book. They were just committed to trying to protect themselves from deregulation by stamping out people like Frank Lorenzo, who were dealing with the realities because their little company was so small and didn't have a big Chicago hub like United or a big Atlanta hub like Delta and so forth.
When you look, if there were CEOs of today's airlines that came to you for advice, because I mean, we saw you mentioned Southwest earlier, but a big news that came out this week that they're dropping the one thing that set them apart with the free baggage. But is there advice you would give to any airline CEO about how to navigate the future?
Well, you really have to do what Southwest is now doing. You have to do that all the time. You have to reevaluate your strategy based on new information, based on where things are. I remember in the 80s where Southwest, we used to say even Herb Kelleher didn't have the authority to change the strategy at Southwest, and he was the CEO. They had this formula, they kept the formula, but times changed. People wanted more premium flying. The fact is that letting bags go free was a very, very expensive perk in the revenue that it kept from Southwest. It's no accident that when Southwest announced the baggage change, its stock was up 5-6%.
Yeah. One of the things you also talk about is, and this is sort of dovetails with our usual mission of talking politics, is you had some interactions with a businessman from New York by the name of Donald Trump at the time.
Seems I've heard of him before.
He ran the Trump Shuttle. It was one of the many industries that he dipped his toes into and wasn't necessarily successful. What was your take on him as an airline executive?
Well, I didn't really deal with him as an airline executive. I deal with him as a dealer, as a negotiator. And we had a selling him the shuttle for $365 million was a dance that went for almost a whole year, on the Trump Princess boat, skiing. We did a lot of stuff together. And Trump was a very tough guy to deal with. And we had some negotiating run-ins that reminds me a little bit of the tariff war today.
The book is called Flying for Peanuts, which, by the way, that's another name that harkens back to something we don't see much anymore, which is peanuts on airlines. Frank Lorenzo, thank you so much for taking some time with us, sir. We appreciate it.
Jim, nice to be with you.
Our pleasure. Final Five is back after this.
Thank you.